This is ACC Nation, your source for ACC sports coverage. Connect with us at accnation.net. Listen to our podcast and streaming radio. Watch us on YouTube and follow us on your favorite social media outlet. Now, here's Will and Jim.
Wake Forest football, ACC Nation's preview of the Wake Forest Demon Deacons with Cam Lemon-Dubrow of 24/7's Demon Deacon Digest. Welcome, Cam. Thanks for joining us and talking a little bit about what's going on. A lot of big things going on, as a matter of fact, at Wake Forest.
Yeah, I decided to take this lovely Sunday afternoon. Me and the missus decided, no, it's the last weekend for us to, actually be available for things. Let's go out, have a couple hours of just us. And I look down at my phone and I have like 10 unread messages and I go, what is going on here? So I was like, you know what? Fine. They can, they can have it today. You guys got it.
You know what? We were, before we started the program, you were talking about having, happy Sunday and glass half full, half empty. And I understand now why it was a happy Sunday. It was like you went out and did some things and enjoyed yourself, and it was a pleasant day.
Pleasant day.
Yeah, I'm hearing already in this household, oh, it's football season again. Oh, man. I said, well, let's give you a little heads up here. Labor Day weekend is really long.
Very long.
Anyway, let's get into what's happening at Wake Forest and talk about new coach, new scheme, just new faces, new names, everything. There's a lot of excitement going on there. So let's get right into that. And Will's gonna take the ball and run with it.
That's a good omen for what Wake Forest is going to do this year.
Yeah, as always, good to chat with you, Cam. It's basically the Wake Forest program has basically gone under a renovation. Out goes Dave Clawson, probably the best coach the program has ever had. In steps in Jake Dickert, a guy who's had a lot of success at some schools that hasn't had a big track record of success. So before we get into the players and everything, just kind of tell us what the pulse of the Wake fan base is with this hire.
Yeah, I think at first this was the best of I don't want to say bad situation, but weird situation. When Dave Clawson stepped down, everyone was completely kind of floored by it. Yeah, there have been 2 bad seasons and, things necessarily weren't trending in the right direction, but the timing of it was kind of what caught everyone off guard. It was after what was usually the normal hiring cycle. He had just hosted I think about 10 or 12 portal prospects at his house the day before the announcement came out. We're all thinking, okay, this is kind of business as usual. They're trying to rebuild there. And then you go through the process of finding a new coach. Some names are thrown around here and there. Neil Brown was one, and I was like, please no. But you land on a guy in Jake Dickert, who at Washington State, like you mentioned, has done well with, not a lot of resources. I mean, that was one of the big things that I think was a selling point for Dickert coming over here, was the fact that Washington State financially could not make I love what them and Oregon State do, because they're going to come get mad at me. I really do like what they're doing, but financially, due to what they have with their TV deal, etc., it's hard for them to fully invest revenue sharing wise, and that's what's going to be important in terms of retaining and acquiring players, which is what you have to do nowadays. That's one of the big reasons. Like, it was like, wow, you found guys like Cam Ward and John Mateer and Kyle Williams, who's going to be a good player for the New England Patriots. Like, they found a lot of good players for basically pennies on the dime. And so you start seeing that, okay, what happens now if you can have that with a little more? Obviously, Wake Forest isn't a Texas, isn't an LSU, isn't a Clemson, but has a little more to them. And so now you see it. And I think one thing that's got everyone excited is the fact that whenever you get the interviews with the players, energy is the buzzword you hear. It's energy, 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 energy. And it's very visible when you go and watch practices, where the last year, 2 years necessarily wasn't a morgue, but this year it's just a completely different just style of how they're doing it, how they're encouraging it. It's just different. And I think that's got people a little more excited of, hey, okay, you know what, it sucks, moving on from a guy like Dave Clawson, but if this guy is going to bring a new energy to the program, we'll hear him out.
New offensive coordinator as the slow mesh is now gone. In
Yes.
steps in Robbie Zell, who came over from South Alabama. So what kind of offense will Wake run under him?
The nomenclature you're going to get is the power spread, and everyone's like, what on earth does that mean? I like to personally equate it to modern day triple option. If you go back to 2012, 2013, what Chad Morris was running at Clemson, what the Bryles kind of like to run, that's what it's like. There's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of motion, a lot of you're using one tight end, two tight end. There's a lot of things that say we want to punch you in the mouth. It is a lot of power run. And that's really helpful when you have a guy like Damon Claiborne who they really want to say, hey, look, here's 30, 35 touches a game. They're going to run the ball. And now with the announcement that Robbie Ashford is going to be the starting quarterback, who is a guy that, the arm is a little bit limited here and there, but is still an excellent athlete with his legs, you're going to see some of that stuff where you're going to have guys coming across the formation and you got to make a decision of, am I going to worry about the guy in motion? Am I going to worry about Robbie taking it himself? Am I worrying about Damon Claiborne? And that's why I kind of equate to a triple option because there's a lot of things. There's a dive, there's a pull, there's a pitch, there's a pass in there. And it really wants to keep you off balance.
And you mentioned the big news of the day as we recorded on Sunday, as Robbie Ashford has won the quarterback job going into week one. So for those who aren't familiar with Ashford, what does he bring?
So Robbie, first and foremost, is experienced in the sense of he's been around the block a few times. He's been at Oregon, at Auburn, and most recently at South Carolina. Now he's here at Wake, so he's been around big time programs, and I think that's important in terms of getting trust from people. That being said, I do think the arm is the accuracy. I think he can throw the ball as well as anyone else can. The accuracy is some issues there. But what he has brought is just an insane level of athleticism. It's been a while since I've seen a quarterback this athletic just in general in person. And then, like when he takes off on a run, you're like, oh, whoa, whoa, hold up. You can do that. And I think that's really important. And I think the big challenge for him, if he does want to keep a job, and we're going to talk to Jake Dicker tomorrow about this, but Dickert has been very clear of this quarterback job is not necessarily over. While yes, you are going to get the starting role for, the first snap against Kennesaw State, this is not necessarily over. And so when you're looking to see if Robbie Ashford can keep the job, you're looking for, can you just make the layups? Can you hit that 5 yard out? Can you hit that 10 yard out? Yes, we will. I need occasionally you need to be able to hit that deep shot, but right now, can you keep us on schedule down, down?
Obviously, this backfield, as you mentioned, but they're going to be relying on it a lot, and they have arguably one of the better backs in the league in Damon Claiborne, who has a 1,000 yard rusher last year. But they also have the depth with Carney coming back. So it shouldn't be an issue in the backfield then.
It shouldn't be, and it's kind of weird with like Tate Carney because it's felt like Tate is really kind of falling down the pecking order because of one thing they want to do is they want to get these running backs in space. And one guy you've seen really ascend, and I think when the depth chart comes out tomorrow, he will be a clear number two, is Ty Clark. Ty Clark was a guy really under recruited out of I think around Franklin, Tennessee, 2 years ago really has just shown to be a good complement to Damon Claiborne. He's got really good speed. He's been pound for pound probably the best player in camp in general. He can run you over. I think that's been really good. And then they got a guy from Duquesne. I really had to remember how to say that funny college up in Pennsylvania, in Jamario Clements, who is more of your style that you kind of see Tate Carney in of just a bowling ball. I am going to run you over. Running some outside zone won't be his thing. I'm going to run trap. I'm going to run power, and I'm going to run you over.
There's a big overhaul at receiver. A lot of guys gone just from graduation portal. I know one of the guys that's back that you're very high on is Micah Mays. Plus, they loaded up in the portal receivers. So who's going to stand out at that position?
I think the three guys you kind of circle are going to be Micah Mays, Sterling Burkhalter, who came from Cincinnati by way of North Carolina A&T, and Carlos Hernandez, who came from Washington State. Hernandez was someone that I think is going to get a lot of touches because he's going to be more in that slot receiver and say, hey, we're going to hit you with the screen, we're going to hit you with a few drags, and you are going to take it and go. I think he got a little he wasn't necessarily lost, but he was probably the third or fourth receiver, but he was also behind a couple of guys that were NFL worthy. And so now you start looking at him and you're like, okay, you can make some things move with you. Burkhalter is a guy that's, 6'4", 205, and rather more of a possession receiver. He had some issues with drops, last year at Cincinnati, also at A&T had it as well. During spring camp, it was popping up a bit and you're a little worried about it. But during fall, I've been very pleasantly surprised. I've seen probably 70, 80% of the practices and the drops just haven't been there. And so it's been fun watching them. And I just as a plug, I mean, the tight ends are gonna be a factor. A guy like Andy Fillet is going to be a factor for them.
With all this, they're going to need a good offensive line. They got overhauled in the portal. My account was 6 different linemen that came in through the portal. So really, it's going to be anybody's guess as to who starts game one.
I think they finally have settled on an offensive line. I think the one returner will be the one starting returning offensive lineman. George Sell has had a really, really good camp. He's going to be entrenched at right guard. Falili Famo, who is someone that they got from Washington State when he entered the portal. Nebraska and LSU were really trying to get him, and he decided to come to Winston-Salem. He will be at right tackle, which was something that we were really like, okay, like this is supposed to be your big ticket guy. You're playing right tackle. That's interesting. But Melvin Siani is someone that has been really strong. The first couple of days he missed all of spring camp. So when you see him out there, like you're working the twos, you're like, okay, let's see if you can come along. And he got better and better and better. And I was actually reading the Athletic the other day, and I confirmed it with someone I talked to on staff that he's performed well enough that they're renegotiating his contract. He's in his third year. This was something that they approached him about. This wasn't something that he approached them about. It was like, look, like you have looked really good in practice, and we think you can be a multi-year starting tackle. Let's go ahead and lock you up right now. So I think they like him at left tackle. Left guard is a guy in Clinton Richard, he was a high 3-star recruit outside of Atlanta, Georgia, a couple of years ago. Looks the part, and you always get a little bit worried about guys that are in their second or third year in the offensive line, but he seems to be handling it well. And so I think those four are going to be pretty fine with it. And now with a new captain in Devin Kalani, they was just also announced today that they announced their captains. Devin Kalani is your prototypical offensive lineman in demeanor. It's really fun watching him opening up practice. A few days ago, I watched him just completely without a helmet, just headbutt a defensive lineman just while he's hyping the team up. And I was like, oh, you are a psycho in the best way possible. But that's what you want out of your offensive lineman. He was a former wrestler in high school. He kind of uses that in his offensive line game as well. And it's like, okay, no, you are very happy to get down and dirty if you need to up front.
It was weird to hear you talk about them going to one of the linemen talk about giving them a raise already before you even played a game. But hey, that's the state of college football in 2025. Let's switch over to defense. A new coordinator, Scotty Hazelton. So what kind of scheme are they going to run?
They are going to run, and it's going to make some people cringe a little bit. Tampa 2. That is where college football is now. I think it was Brett Coleman actually did a video about it a year ago, and I ended up doing a video when Scotty was hired. Where Tampa 2, I think when we're all football fans, we think about Tony Dungy and everything, and how for a while it was a really good defense, and then started getting picked away, picked away, picked away. If you start looking around college football now, a lot more people are running Tampa 2 because it's been what college football has evolved to is a heavy passing offense. And what did Tampa 2 do? Just decided, hey, look, man, you are not going to pass on us. And you can go into more schematic stuff. It's Tampa 2 is essentially cover three. If you really want to start looking at it, and I think a lot more people are getting to that three high shell. And I think that's what Scotty Hazelton wants to do when you have guys like Devon Patterson, guys like Nick Anderson, guys like Dylan Hazen, where you've got people that you can kind of move around a lot. Where let's shut down the passing offense and see. I think what's happening is people are starting to go into the mode where my Philadelphia Eagles, who just won the Super Bowl, just were like, well, if teams are just gonna pass on us, we'll just stop that because they're not equipped to run the ball well enough. So I think that's one of the weird things I'm gonna start watching for Scotty this year.
I want to start on the backside, the secondary, and work our way up towards the front because you mentioned there's a couple names, Anderson and Patterson are the names to know in the secondary. But let's be real, This secondary as a whole was pretty bad, at least in terms of pass coverage. Second worst completion percentage in FBS behind Mississippi State. Teams completed over 70% of their passes against Wake. So how much? I mean, what are they doing to improve it? Let's
Yeah,
just go there.
big thing is personnel. Last year, and it was something that Coach Clausen had definitely made us think about for a while, was the fact that they just didn't have the horses to run what they wanted to do at cornerback. Part of it was an inability to get certain people out of the portal. Part of it was injuries, and part of it was purely ineffective play. It was a storm of, okay, we're now just we have to now run vanilla cover three, which any college level offensive coordinator should be able to go, okay, here's how I immediately just ease this up. So that was last year, and last year was just an abject failure at, figuring out the corner position. This year, one thing that they've done is completely overhaul the corner position. A guy like Jackson Mole, it's not to really pile on him, but Jackson Mole was a co-starter at corner for, a few weeks towards the end of the season. He's been working with the fours now. Like that's how different this thing has been overhauled. It starts with two guys on the outside, and Karan Prunty from NCA&T, who was at Kansas, was I think a freshman All-American at Kansas as well. And Trayvon West. Prunty has come in and really just been an experienced, steady guy again and again and again. And Trayvon West is someone, he's in his third year. He was supposed to play a bit last year, but he got in, played against NC State, and I think was like the third game of the season, and played, I think, 40 really good snaps, and then got hurt for the rest of the year. But he's come back, and for my money, I think he's had the best camp out of anyone on this team. Every time I look at him, I just go, man, this dude's really having a good camp. He's really proved himself with his depth a little bit. They've gotten Lardarius Webb Jr. Yes, you are that old. That is Lardarius Webb's kid. So, that's the one fun thing about this Wake team is that they have a few guys with NFL legacies. I think that's fun. And then a guy, Ashad Williams from North Alabama, was a guy coveted from Big Ten and SEC schools as well. So I think they've got, 4 to 5 guys that they trust. They've got a guy in Sasha Garcia who was on the men, and they think he'll be back mid-season. I feel like Charlie Brown and the cornerbacks are Lucy with the football. I have put my stake into I think they will be there. It's hard to be worse than last year in that this regard. But I really think that unit is going to be a very good unit. There might be some bumps and bruises here and there, just that it's how that's the nature of the game. But I think on the whole, that unit has gone from being I am gonna cry every time they're on the field to no, I'm really excited to like actually watch them.
Yeah, Cam, you and I are kind of relatively in the same age, and we're both at that point where we're seeing a lot of players we watch growing up, and all you see junior at the end, and we're like,
Yeah.
oh God.
Oh yeah.
So linebacker's probably the one spot on the defense where it feels set with Dylan Hazen and Quincy Bryant back. Plus, they picked up a couple guys in the portal, so it feels like this would be a pretty strong unit for the Deacs this year.
I think the linebacker room might be the best on the team. And it feels weird because, like you said, I think going into camp in the first probably week and a half of camp, it was like, yeah, it's going to be Dylan Hazen and Quincy Bryant up front. But they have been mixing and matching 4 people: Hazen, Bryant, uh, Frank Cusano, who was a second-year guy that they brought over from Washington State, and Aiden Hall, who's a true junior. Aiden Hall's had always had some upside to him, just hasn't been able to stay on the field, but is really 6'1", 6'2". I think his wingspan 6'5", 6'6". He's a really long guy. They've been mixing and matching those 4, and you're like, yep, you're trying to see who's comfortable more and more. And then you kept watching with the ones, and you're like, they're still figuring out who's gonna be the number one, and it's not because Dylan or Quincy have played poorly. It's been Aiden Hall has every time you start watching him, you're like, oh, you've got some good length to you, and you can make some things happen. Frank Cusano really has looked good in a Mike linebacker thing, so I think they truly do have 4 guys that they trust there. And Alec Marenko, I think we picked up from Kansas State. I think he's been solid for depth. I think he'll be more a special teams guy, or let's see different packages. Darius Jones, guy from he's a second-year guy and went to St. Francis Academy up in Baltimore. Looked fine. I think they're going to keep him on the developmental path of come in and get 5, 10 snaps a game. We'll see you next year. But they truly feel like they have 4 guys that they really trust. I would wager Hazen and Bryant are going to be the starters on snap one, but does that continue the rest of the year? I'm not all that sure.
Yeah, I feel like the defensive line is probably where the biggest question mark is because they lost so much to graduation. So they had to load up in the portal with a bunch of transfers for this. So who's looking good so far?
On the edge, this is another one where the NFL legacies are. You've got Gabe Kershke. His father played in the NFL for a bit. And you've also got Langston Hardy, who also has a NFL father, and Kevin Hardy as well. His brother Camden Hardy's also on. Yeah, you're that old. Don't worry. Camden Hardy's also on the team as well. But I think between Langston Hardy and Gabe Kershke and the third and Newark Acuff, those three edge rushers are they've really impressed. And they've impressed in different ways. Hardy has been a guy that has really just kind of been powering through you again and again and again. Gabe Kershke's paws, I mentioned it to him when we interviewed him once, his hands are massive. So he just kind of bludgeons you again and again. And Newer doesn't really have the same makeup as either of them. He's kind of thinned out, but his speed rushing is incredible. I think those three guys on the edge have been really, really helpful for them. Interior, I think you have a little bit more questions. I like a guy in Jaden Loving, the guy from Western Kentucky, and he's been a really good size and a really good leader for them. Who's going to be next to him is a little bit up in the air between Dallas Afalava, a little more of an undersized defensive tackle, about 6'1" or so. A guy, Mateen Abiragbo, who they got from Georgetown last year, actually. He's someone that the last staff loved him. They brought him in, and he got used to a strength and conditioning program that wasn't Georgetown, and his body blew up, and I don't think he really knew how to handle it then. He's come back this year and he flashes again and again and again and again. So I think, making sure you have that depth at defensive tackle is probably going to be the best area for you. But I can also see them maybe mitigating that with, what, if we're not necessarily the best there, what's it to us to run maybe some three down and say, can we put one of these linebackers as an edge rusher and then, kind of figure out different packages there.
You made me feel about 20 years older going through this defensive depth chart, Cam. Jim?
You know what that is, don't you?
Oh no.
Yeah, I know.
With this whole age thing, I'm it's catching up. That's all I'm going to tell you. It'll catch up. And every decade, it's like somebody throwing a light switch. You wake up and you go, I don't remember that hurting. Get used to it. Cam, one of the things that I'm getting from this conversation that you and Will are having is this is a different feel.
Yeah.
This team, the program as a whole, because of the coaches, the change in the scheme, bringing in people from the portal. Of course, NIL money and the transfer portal are playing huge roles in how teams are beginning to develop. I feel as if Dickert is at the beginning stage of making something really interesting happen there at Wake Forest that we haven't seen for a while. That Dave Clawson was probably stymied a little bit because of that transition period from old school into new school.
And I think it's really interesting because, I don't think the retention was necessarily the reason they went from 11-3 in 2021 to the next year, 8-4 to the next year being, what it was at 4-8, beginning of 2, 4, and 8 years. But I do think it definitely would have stymied between a year you get 8 wins and a year you get 4 wins. I think it definitely stymies that. And that's something that, I think Jake Dicker kind of realizes now. And I think with what the rules are with revenue sharing, is that going to be the same rule in the next 5 minutes? I don't know. There's court cases going on every day, but I do think, that was something that was a big priority for him when you look through a lot of these positions. When he needed to fix a position like cornerback, for example, all three, like the three out of the four guys he got from the portal are redshirt seniors. They're in their last year of eligibility. This is a area of the team we need to fix right now. But then you look around and it's like, okay, nope, you got it. You got a guy in Will Lorzell and from South Alabama. He's a redshirt freshman. You got a guy in Frank Cusano who's a redshirt freshman. You get a guy, you get a guy at tight end again with Cameron Johnson who's in his second year. Melvin Siani was a redshirt sophomore and you got him. There's a lot more of, okay, yes, we want to be good this year, but also we can't put all of our eggs in the basket and say, let's be the Indiana of 2025. Because I think if you try to do that, I think Indiana did a great job. How sustainable is that? How replicable is that? And I think with them, they kind of realized, okay, if we now think we can put a lot more money into retaining our players and being able to keep these guys, we can start going back to that mold of the schools like a Wisconsin, like a Utah, where you might not be the best, one year, but you hit year three, year four of those cycles, and those teams won 9, 10, 11 games in those cycles.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of what this wants to be is, we're not, they're not ever going to be the team that's going to recruit at the highest level. That's just not who they are. They're not going to pay a top dollar for that. But what they do want to do is pay for retention. And I think that's something we saw in terms of how they want to attack the portal.
So how does this all this talk about? Well, we got to have 9 games that are group of 4 essentially
Right.
come into play here because I'm looking at the schedule and looking at some of the teams that Wake Forest is playing. Obviously, it would move some of those off the schedule in the future. What's the chatter about that?
I think it's a little hard right now because for the ACC, you have an odd number of teams. And so, part of the equation of, yeah,
For
next year you
now.
could move. Yeah, now for now, next year, I believe Purdue is one of the games you have. I think you have Army as well, and Army has a really good relationship with Wake Forest.
Yeah.
There's a couple of games off the schedule next year that I think, in theory, could possibly be dropped in order for, let's say a Mississippi State, because I don't think Ole Miss is going to schedule them ever again after Canada getting out of the contract. But like a Mississippi State or Florida or someone decides to get out of, I think there's the ability for that to happen. Do you really need to go play Akron next year? But at the same time, I can also see the value of it for Wake in the ACC right now, of especially if you're not moving to 9 conference games. Are you gonna do that? Are you gonna take away a game that's probably a good home game for you for just in terms of winning equity, just to satisfy what South Carolina wants to do, just to satisfy what Texas A&M wants to do? And I think that's kind of the interesting push and pull is I think it's fun. I think I would prefer to play more Power Four opponents. I think that is I always want to have those games. But at the same time, I also do have to recognize, if you're a school like Wake Forest, one, home games matter to you. Like that matters to you a lot. Revenue matters a lot right now, especially that there's a now 20 million and moving, expense that you have to budget for every single year. So having these home games and having games that you win that can push you more, especially in the ACC, that's going now not only to the visibility metrics for paying out, but for you basically get to eat what you kill in terms of competition. How much appetite is there to necessarily throw on a game against, Texas A&M if you're like, well, that was a win that could have helped us get to a bowl game. Now, the other side of that is definitely if you're a better program, you don't worry about that. But this is also a team coming off back-to-back 4-8 seasons. I don't know if you have the leeway to be thinking like that.
Yeah, gotcha. I'm always going to be old man yells at cloud and replace the cloud with SEC. Old man yells at SEC. Um, anyway, let's do this. Let's go down the schedule and do a thumbs up and thumbs down and the Will Waggle. Go ahead, Will. As to how you feel about the game as we go through. It's starting as Will pointed out. We're recording on a Sunday, so this week is when things kick off. It's on Friday, the 29th of August. Kennesaw State is at Wake Forest. You talk about all these home games. There's a lot of home games on the schedule this year. That is not a bad thing when it comes down to building support and also some pretty decent so far, because we don't have the complete television schedule, but
Right.
some decent television exposure as well. So Kennesaw State visits Wake Forest at 7 o'clock on Friday as part of the Labor Day weekend extravaganza for the ACC. It's going to be on the ACC network. So thumbs up, thumbs down.
Oh, this one has to be and a thumbs up if this is even close to a waggle. season is in a bit of peril at a certain point. I mean, you're 17-point favorites against Kennesaw State. I like Kennesaw State. I'm from Atlanta. That they're about an hour and a half for me. I love the team, but this is one where I think Wake kind of shows. And I think this is weird because I think one thing people are going to see, and I think it pops up in a game of Kennesaw State and Western Carolina.
Hmm.
Wake looks like a more off the bus type of team than they have the last 2 years. And that's something you haven't been able to say about Wake. So I'm interested to see how that pops up.
Okay. All right, thumbs up. So we're heading in the right direction when it comes down to building, as you were indicating, bowl eligibility. So the next game is on Saturday, September 6th. It is against Western Carolina again at home. It's 2 o'clock. It's going to be on streaming, the ACC network streaming side of things. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I'll go again, thumbs down. It seems like going to be an emotional day. One thing I don't know if Wake fans have
Flip that.
thumbs up, excuse me, thumbs up. Thumbs up.
You are never going to hear the end of this.
No. It's gonna be an emotional day for Wake fans. That's gonna be actually their football reunion weekend, and it's the first time that Jim Grobe is actually going to be back at
Oh,
Wake Forest since he was let go as head coach. They're
yeah.
planning to have all of the living Wake Forest head coaches. So it's gonna be Grobe, it's gonna be Caldwell will be there, Clausen obviously, and Dickert, and they're gonna have all of them during the reunion weekend. So it would be very paramount if you didn't embarrass yourself on that weekend.
Gosh, yes. Thumbs up. Okay. Our next game is on Thursday, September 11th. This is when things start to get a little hairy because it's NC State coming to Winston-Salem to visit the Demon Deacons. This game is going to be at 7:30, and ESPN has decided right up front this is going to be an interesting game, so we're putting it on the tube in prime time for Thursday. So, thumbs up, thumbs down, or will waggle.
Well, we're 100% waggling on this one. Um, if you talk to an NC State fan, the most annoying thing about their schedule is probably playing Wake Forest because it never fails. If NC State has any sort of expectations or anything, Wake Forest is going to beat them. It happened last year where, I think last year they had such high expectations. Obviously, the Tennessee game to go well for them. Wake Forest walks in, unfortunately does end Grayson McCall's career. That was a really somber moment of that game, but Wake kind of walked them down in the fourth quarter in Carter Finley.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things that Wake and NC State have just such weird games. I think NC State's kind of figuring out their own stuff with two new coordinators. I know they've had some positives. I really love TJ Bailey. I think he's a really good quarterback. Can they block for him? I don't know. Are their linebackers fixed? I don't know. It's a home game on a short week. You know, I don't. It's a rivalry game. You throw the record books out for that. We'll see. We'll see what happens September 11th.
We got the exact same answer when we did the NC State preview. So it's very obvious that this is on everyone's mind. So then next up is a bye week. So that's a good thing. Coming out of that game, at the very least, you can kind of see, okay, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? How can we improve? Because coming up next, you got another ACC competitor who is on the rise and looking for some wins. It's Saturday, September 27th. Again, a home game. Man, how did you get all these home games? Georgia Tech comes to town. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or wiggle waggle?
While it's my hometown team, unfortunately, I have to do the thumbs down for this one for Wake Forest fans. I'm not going to be called a homer and be like, well, they can win any game, but could they win a game against Georgia Tech? I think so. I think Georgia Tech definitely has some structural flaws, but I think a guy like Buster Faulkner is one of my favorite offensive coordinators in the country. Haynes King's really good. Jamal Haynes, very good at football. I think they've spent a lot of money to really try to charge up that team. And I wouldn't be surprised. If you told me Georgia Tech's a 9-10 win team at the end of the year, I'd go, yeah, that makes sense. So I think, unfortunately, that one's gonna be a thumbs down. I think positive. If that's your first loss of the year, I think Wake fans probably go, yeah, we'll take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, That's not a bad place to lose. Saturday, October 4th, it's going to be at Blacksburg, Virginia Tech. The Hokies, we're not really 100% sure what's what. So, and I kind of get the feeling from just about everybody that we talked to, including when we did the preview, it was sort of like, well, it could be, but it might not be, but but it could be. So
Right.
thumbs up, thumbs down.
Oh, can I kind of want to middle this one just because
Okay.
it's an interesting one because like you said, I don't know if anyone knows what's going on with this offense. There's some injuries that have been popping up. I like Kyron Drones. I'm glad he's back and healthy. What kind of Kyron Drones we're gonna get this year? His receiving group, they have a former Wake Forest receiver in Donovan Green. One of the big things about Donovan Green is he going to be healthy by the time that comes around? It's a serious question. Again, I believe they have new coordinators on both sides of the ball as well. I think Pry has had some coaching. We talk a lot about, Manny Diaz. I mean, he's not Manny Diaz, but Manny's been solid. Mario Cristobal. Brent Pry has had some a lot of gaffes himself in terms of clock management, in terms of coaching in general. You know, I would feel a little better if that was at home. If you switched, Georgia Tech to away and Virginia Tech at home, I'd probably feel a lot better about it. And that's why I'm a little bit middling about it because weird things happen in Lane Stadium. That place is, I was there
Yeah.
just kind of as a fan in, what was that, 2019 when Wake Forest went up there. And it was like, yeah, Wake's, positioning to play well and maybe make a run for the Atlantic. And then both their wide receivers get hurt in the game. Jamie Newman gets hurt in the game. Lane Stadium was a house of horrors. So I think it's one of those team wise, I feel fine, but environment and spot, I'm not all that sure.
Yeah. You cannot throw the environment out with that place. Lane Stadium is just rough. All right. Saturday, October 11th, going to be at Oregon State. Going to take a little trip. I don't really know that much about Oregon State, and I'm going to depend on the two of you to say what's what. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or a wiggle waggle on this one. And keep in mind, everybody, when the wiggle waggle comes out, it's not because we're not 100% sure about something. It's usually because it's so early in the season, even now, with the season just a couple of days away, we don't really know what's going to happen. We're projecting as much as possible. So,
I actually feel pretty fairly decent on this one for Wake Forest. I'll go thumbs up. I
okay.
think Oregon State over 6.5 wins was one of my favorite things to do this year. I think their schedule is a really positive schedule. They get guys like Cal, Fresno State, Lafayette, Washington State, Sam Houston State. They get a very favorable home schedule, so I think they have a really good chance to win. They return a lot of people, but this is one where I kind of go. I think the body types of the two won't be equal. I think this is one where I think Wake can kind of go in there, and I think that style that our Oregon State plays, I think will lean a little bit more of, well, Wake wants to run the ball against you, and I think they'll have a little bit better chances against them than they will some other ACC opportunities. And so I like Oregon State. I think they're a fun team. I think that offense is going to be really fun, but I do think that this is one where you start seeing kind of the parity a little bit between, a power four, whether, it is Wake Forest and, someone who's kind of in the middle ground of a G5, P4.
Yeah.
And they're facing former Duke quarterback Malik Murphy.
They are facing former league, and
Okay.
the thing is, it's really tough because I like Malik, but I don't necessarily think he's all that great of a quarterback. Now I have my reservations about Robbie Ashford myself, but I think Malik Murphy is a guy that Duke might have won 9 games last year in spite of him rather than because of him.
All right. Got a bye after that, which is probably a good thing coming back off the West Coast. Get a little break there. And then when you come back, it's Saturday, October 25th. SMU, again, a home game.
Home game,
This,
homecoming.
yeah, this ought to be a fill the stadium sort of game. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs down. I think everyone has, SMU as a kind of a trending down team after their experience last year where they were in the AC title game. I still think this, and it's kind of the opposite reasoning of what I had with the Oregon State. I think this is a SMU team that has really spent up in terms of keeping their players, the transfer portal, and the body types, I think are just going to be a little bit too much. I really love Kevin Jennings. I wrote about him the other day, where I think he's one of the most fun players in college football, and I think he's really good. That's one I just in good faith cannot even feign. You know what? Right now, I think you'd probably be 3 touchdown underdogs at best against that. Let's if we get there and it's different, cool. But for right now, that's not what I'm projecting as a win.
That's a projection. So we're just we'll know better when we get closer, right? Saturday, November 1st, on the road, Florida State. And again, here's a team that we're not really 100% sure about what's what.
No. I'm gonna do a little wiggle on this one because of what you said. I think Castellanos is a good, not great quarterback. I think he can win you some games. I think he can lose you some games. What is that offensive line? What is going on defense? Is Gus Malzahn, who, I think the chatter last year was like, I think he might just be close to retiring. How much has he got? His offenses also weren't that great the last couple of years. I think Tony White defensively is a really good defensive coordinator, but you're not necessarily bringing in a ton of proven players. I think they have a corner that's really, really good, and I really enjoy him. But on the whole, you're going back to the strategy where you have built this entire plane through the portal. It worked for you well one year, and it worked for you miserably last year. And this year, it's been very notable that the transfer portal crop was not as good as it's been in the last couple of years because people have been paying up to keep their players. I'm never in love with those types of teams. And so I don't really know what Florida State's got for me this year.
Yeah, that's roll them. Saturday, November 8th, going to be at Scott Stadium, taking on Virginia.
I'm going to go thumbs up there. That was a game last year Wake Forest probably should have won. If they had a kicker they trusted, if their fifth year receiver and Taylor Morin, now he's 6 year receiver didn't fumble driving down the field, and then your 5th-year guy and Donovan Green try to pick it up and run with it and just land on the ball, you win that game. Yeah, it's in Charlottesville this year. It's later in the season. I think Tony Elliott's a great guy. I think the experiment might be getting close to being over. The injuries have already started piling up for UVA. They lost Monroe Mills, who I thought was going to be one of the best offensive linemen in the ACC already. They're already starting. They went and got it felt like 15 cornerbacks in the portal. They've already started losing a couple of those for a couple of weeks. I think Cam Robinson will probably be back by then, but they're already starting off. But I think it's one of those things of those teams like, if they don't get off to a good start, that team could fall apart by mid-November at that part. I love Chandler Morris. I also wrote about him in that article about my favorite quarterbacks. I think Chandler Morris is a fun video game level quarterback. He's going to put up 400 yards whenever you ask him to. But I don't know if Virginia just has enough in the tank, by November, to really make me feel like super. I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll be a close spread and everything. But I think that's one of the schedule where I'm going to go, you know what? I feel a lot better than that compared to, say, SMU.
And the thing of it is, yeah, you talk about they're already a MASH unit, and the season haven't even started yet. Down 2 linemen. They're down down multiple cornerbacks. Or safety is going to miss the start of the year. Cam Robinson's going to miss the start of the year.
You get off those. The vibes are a big thing in sports in general. You get off to. I haven't looked at their schedule in about a week, but I think they kind of opened with, I think it was like Coastal Carolina and NC State. You go 0-2 in those games, and things start getting real hairy for you.
Yeah. You're not the only person, and I would say that you're in the majority when it comes down to your opinion about Tony Elliott.
I could go on a long rant about the offense, but this is not the time or the place for that.
All right, next game. It's in state here, Saturday, November 15th. North Carolina comes to Wake Forest. You get to see Hoodie and his I swore I was going to quit saying that, but I'm going to keep calling him Darth Hoodie just for the heck of it. And his girlfriend going to drop by Winston-Salem.
The amount of my friends that have asked me, hey, can you help me get tickets to the UNC game? Is impeccable. Everyone wants to.
Hey, Cam.
It was a big thing at AC kickoff. There was so much security around, specifically because Bill Belichick. It's a whole spectacle. I think it's funny sometimes. I do wish that Dave was around for this game because seeing Dave Clawson coaching against Bill Belichick is one of my. That would have been a fever dream for me.
Hey, Cam. By any chance, can you hook a brother up with some tickets?
I mean, I can do my. I'm trying to get my friends one, so there's a line right now.
Here's your response. I'm not talking about that.
not talking about that. We're on the Kennesaw State.
New phone,
Yes.
new phone, who dis? I don't know. Thumbs up or thumbs down on this game?
I have waggled on this one a while for the simple question of what is UNC this year. I think UNC is in a position where their schedule is kind of favorable in terms of them hitting, a lot of wins in the season. I think Gio Lopez is a really good quarterback. I really enjoy Gio Lopez. I think he's fun. What's that offensive line looking like right now? There's some injuries popping up there that's not been looking great. Defensively, I've got some questions about that defensive line, which is really weird for a Bill Belichick team, but I have some questions about that defensive line. I don't have any questions about corner. I think the corners are going to be really good. And so I think there's enough questions to where I go, and I thought about it when Bill was the hire, and as I saw their portal come in, it felt like they are going to trust coaching a lot this year. And I think Bill is one of the best coaches in the history of college football. And I will say that now. And if UNC fans want to get mad at me for what I'm going to say next, whatever. Bill wasn't good at coaching the last few years when he was in New England. He just wasn't. How does he adjust to, say, a player, what we just talked about with Melvin Siani? How does he adjust to a player, say, who's starting to play well and say, yeah, coach, I want to raise? How does Bill Belichick handle that? Or I guess Mike Lombardi would be the guy that handled that, to be quite honest. But how does Bill respond to that? Bill has some experience dealing with Mac Jones, but what's going to happen when Gio Lopez does something stupid? Because while I love Gio Lopez, he'll do something stupid really fast. And I love it. I love the chaos. And so, that's something I want to see out of UNC. I think, in a year or two, I think they could have the talent where, they could start out talenting people and be kind of that old UGA Mark Richt type team that I kind of grew up watching. And I think right now I'm just not sure what that team is. And so you're telling me, and Wake usually plays them pretty well. Wake played them well last year when Wake basically had given up. That's usually a pretty close game. It's in Winston-Salem. I'm fine putting that in the let's see if we can make that a toss-up sort of thing.
Does it feel like there's a team with a bigger gap between ceiling and floor than UNC though? Because if it works, they could be, a dark horse ACC team. And if it fails, which I think is very realistic, Steve will be coaching in 2026.
Right. And so and that's one of the big reasons why a lot of my friends, and I have a lot of UNC friends, and they've been like, how do you feel about what you've read and what you've heard? And I go, I don't know. Like it's a truly, they could have two different tail outcomes, and I don't think anyone should be surprised because, I also thought that team last year was pretty carried by also a really good running back. And I think they still have some good running backs back there as well, but it's just a different team. And and that's the hard part about the portal is it's really hard to figure out these sorts of teams and this quickly. Half the time their own coaches don't know how to figure it out.
Yeah, we're looking at all pretty much everybody that we talk to in the ACC. We'll end up talking with I think everybody, with the exception of maybe one team, for previews this season. But almost everybody has come out and said, "Hey, we've got this incredibly long list, personnel roster. 40 plus players we've never heard of before that have all transferred. So we're trying to learn who's who. So yeah, I mean, it's a shot in the dark sometimes knowing what's going on. Right. If I will just give some advice, not that anybody's going to listen to it, but if I had a player come to me and ask me for a raise, here's what you don't say. And people in hell would like ice cubes. Don't say that.
I mean, they would.
Saturday, November 22nd. It's Delaware. It's
Delaware.
Another home game.
It is.
Hey, it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Thumbs up. I think out of all of the non-conference games, I think between them and Oregon State, it's kind of the toss-up there. I think Delaware is a frisky, frisky, frisky team, though.
Yeah,
Like
I
that
agree.
team was really good at the FCS level. They have a guy, funny enough, Anwar O'Neal, who actually had a Wake Forest offer a few years back, but was kind of lower on the totem pole, so ended up going to Delaware. Uh, he's been really good for them. I don't know how many teams coming from the FBS that have gone. You've got a tackle that I think could start at the Power Four level pretty easily right now. Um, I think, the main question about them is, do they have the explosiveness to handle an ACC level team? I don't think they do. I think those types of teams are really going to struggle, especially because I think one thing about Wake this year is while everyone remembers Sam Hartman and John Walford and Jamie Newman slinging the ball down the field, I keep asking myself the question, is Wake Forest just going to kind of drag teams into the mud this year and just say we're going to run the ball 30, 35 times with, with running backs, another 15 times with Robbie Ashford, whether it's designed or scrambled, when with the defense that's good. When you play a team like Delaware, that's usually a recipe for that FCS team to kind of get blown out the doors. And
Yeah.
so that's where with the one I'm like, you know what? I think I like the Delaware guys and I like, I like Zach Marker, but you know, I don't think that's one where I'm really too concerned just yet about.
And Delaware is almost consistently, at least on that level, has been a pretty decent
Yeah.
team over the years too. So next up is Saturday, November 29th, and you travel to Durham to take on Duke.
I'm gonna go thumbs down here. I think that definitely will upset some Wake fans because I think Wake and Duke are probably the big two closest peers in
Mhm.
the ACC in terms of proximity and in terms of kind of what schools they are. I really like what Manny has done there. I thought Manny didn't really got the short end of the stick at Miami the last year or so, and has come to Duke, and they've invested in him in a way that I thought Duke wouldn't really invest in football. I thought Duke would really be a team that'd be take the check, take the losses when it came to football, and they've been like, no, like we're investing in a really, really good front office. We're investing in our players. We've got a guy in Chandler Rivers that's really good. Per Pete Nakos, and I have really no reason. I'm usually very skeptical about NIL numbers unless I see the contract, but I don't really have a reason to distrust Pete Nakos. But they have the highest paid quarterback in the country in Darian Minsa, who I think is a very good quarterback. Do I think he's good enough to be the highest paid quarterback in the country? Not really. But it shows the level of investment they're trying to put into football. And I think that it's just one of those ones where I think Manny's coached really well. Road games are hard, man. Road games are really hard. Wake has really struggled with Duke the last couple of years. Lost on a walk-off touchdown last year on a broken play. Uh, Year before, really just didn't play well against them either. I think this is one where, end of the year, it would suck to end on a losing note, but I think Duke is just positioned better in terms of projections right now. And I think that one is a thumbs down for me.
All right. So projection wise, it looks like it's a bowl team.
I think that's what the
Um,
expectations should be. I think that's the barometer of should you be happy with this season. If you make a bowl game, I think you did well enough because that means you've probably either done one of swept your non-conference schedule, which is pretty soft, and found your way to beating teams like maybe FSU's down, UVA, maybe an NC State. You found your way to 2 wins in the bowl, or you lose to the Oregon State, but that means you found 3 wins in the conference and you went 500 in conference play. I think you're okay with that. I
yeah.
think well 3-5, not 500, you went 3-5, but I think you're okay with that with a team that, like I said, the portal crop wasn't the best as in years past. You had to do it basically overnight because your ex-coach left after the first week of the portal season, which is it's not a shot at Dave. I think he made the decision when he did, but it's a challenge. That's something you have to do. You have 50 plus new players on this team. That's hard, and you obviously are not one of the biggest spenders in the conference, much less the country. If you fight your way back to a bowl, find your way to 6 or 7 wins, I think that's a really good stepping stone to the future and saying, this is what we're able to do there. What can we do with a little more stability after that?
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like a good game plan to me overall. I got one question for you after watching a game the other night. You guys don't happen to have anybody on your team that is a seventh year guy that likes TikTok, do you? I mean, I just want to make sure.
God.
That was as a connoisseur of Pac-12 After Dark, I am very much was watching that. And you went to Yale. You went to Yale. You be smarter than that.
Apparently not.
He's right. And I thought I think I tweeted out. I thought that was a kind of a bad call. Let the players play. But also that's a situation thing where you got to go, man. Like celebrate when you get to the sideline, big dog. I promise you'll be just fine.
Yeah. Not to bring up somebody else. I mean,
No,
that's something I had to bring up at some point, and this is it. So.
You gave me a good question to ask Dicker tomorrow when we give him not just after watching Stanford and Hawaii, how do you get these guys to make sure they're taking quote unquote lower level the teams seriously, but also how do you make sure your guys aren't getting dumb penalties?
Yeah, I tell you what, if he looks at you and starts to roll his eyes, say, I was just asked to ask you this question by the guys at ACC Nation. I'm just the messenger. Don't shoot me. So yeah, I'll cover you. We're
gonna have beef with Jake Dicker now because of you.
Oh man. Will, any last thoughts, comments, questions?
One just kind of want to go back to we were talking about at the beginning with Damon Claiborne, and you talked about the way he might be used. Like last year, he got roughly 250 touches and stayed relatively healthy. What do you expect his workload to be like this season?
I think don't be surprised in the first two games he gets like a half, to be quite honest. I don't think, especially if you do what you need to do, you don't need to go out there and beat, Kennesaw State or Western Carolina by 50. But if Wake gets up, 21, 17 or so, hey, Ty Clark, what you got for me? Jamario Clements, let's figure out what we've got back here. And so I think if you saw him, 15, 20 touches the first two games just to make sure, hey, remember, because during fall camp, he has been allowed to be tackled. They have been like, you are in bubble wrap. You are down by thud, no matter even if the plays are live. So yeah, get him back in the first couple of games, let him remember how to be tackled and go down. But I also think one big thing they're doing is I don't think they'll have him on kickoff returns. I think kickoff and punts, they're just not going to have him there. It sucks because, I think he's the most explosive player on the team, but I think someone like Carlos Hernandez and Chris Barnes can handle it too. But don't have him on the highest impact plays of the game. So that's smart. But I think as things go along, don't be shocked to see 25 to 30 touches. And I think I want to make sure it's touches because they do really want to use these running backs as weapons out of the backfield, motioning them out wide. They want them to be extensions of the passing game. So look, and Wake's going to run some 5 wide. I don't think I'm really breaking any confidentiality by saying that they'll run some 5 wide. DeMon's come out of the backfield and get a catch. Like he's going to be used in a lot of different ways than I think he was last year.
Cam Lemon-Dubrow of 24/7's Deacon Digest, our special guest with a preview of Wake Forest football. Thank you. Always a pleasure, sir, to have you on the program and talk a little bit of football and whatever else might pop up.
This is one of the most fun things I do in the off seasons. I am always happy to be here. So thank you all for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Cam.
ACC Nation, your source for ACC sports coverage with Will and Jim. Be sure to subscribe, and follow us on our podcast, streaming radio, and YouTube. Connect with us on Blue Sky, Reddit, Instagram, Threads, Mastodon, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn.